Dollars and Cents is made on the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. We pay our respects to elders past and present and acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded.
Hello and welcome to Dollars and Cents, the Australia Institute podcast where we explain just what the hell is going on in the economy. I'm Angus Blackman, executive producer of podcasts here at the Australia Institute, filling in for Eleanor Johnston-Leake, who's off unwell this week. And I'm here in the virtual studio today with Australia Institute chief economist, Greg Jericho. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Angus.
How are you? You living the dream? I'm bringing a bit of Melbourne to the show this week.
Well, Eleanor went down to Melbourne and caught something, and I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's probably Dan Andrews' fault.
Correlation equals causation.
I'm taking out Eleanor. Yeah, that's the
Melbourne is clearly the epicenter of the flu.
Well, I mean, let's not go into Victoria and illness.
But no, hopefully Eleanor is resting up and getting well so she can be back firing next week because we are missing her. But we shall carry on without her.
We'll muddle through. The boys will do their best.
The boys, yes.
Actually, funnily, on, pandemic jokes, National Cabinet just met. Remember those guys? Used to see them all the time. And now
the Commonwealth will not be standing by and letting a race to the bottom of states falling over themselves to attract data centres at the cost of household bills, reliability or emissions.
We should choose the energy mix, not a minister in Canberra who is driven by ideology.
There is no such thing as energy agnostic. What it means is that they want to be able to run data centres on coal or gas and pump even more emissions into the sky. And guess what? Those emissions don't just stay in Queensland, they go everywhere.
And that's why we came to a common position which recognised that all states aren't exactly the same. And that was accommodated in the way that we normally do, in a flexible way.
So the federal government had been talking about a renewable energy mandate for new data centres, but at the end of the National Cabinet meeting, turns out maybe not.
Yeah, apparently Queensland and Northern Territory get a nice little carve-out. They can use coal or gas if they want.
Great.
There was a nice line about, but we expect that renewable energy will be cheaper, so they probably won't end up using it. And I'm like, so why were they so desperate to get this carve out? I mean, it's true that renewable is a cheaper alternative, but there is a scarcity of supply of energy due to the absolute hunger for energy from these data centers that is just hoovering up all the energy, excess energy that there is. And so that is why there is, like we're seeing overseas, that these data centers are not leading to so much of a boom in renewable energy, but a boom in more use of gas turbines, coal and other things, and just being the dirtiest bloody energy suckers that you could come up with. And it seems, unfortunately, despite all protestations by Chris Bowen that federal law will override the states and they'll all have to use renewables, not so for Queensland and Northern Territory, at least at this stage.
Well, as a not so proud Gold Coast boy myself, we are a bit different up there.
And I bet you're so shocked that Queensland has, done this deal, especially with the LNP government up there. Certainly not the biggest friend of renewables. And it's just this is the problem with these huge data centers is that they need so much energy, not to just run the chips, but to cool basically run all the air conditioners and everything to keep the whole thing cold, that you need a huge amount of renewable introduced to the energy sector just to basically stay evens.
Yeah.
And the big worry from everyone is that, that'll be the intention. And then we see the slip sliding to, let's just have more gas, more coal, and more emissions.
Yeah. And I mean, there has been so much coverage of the supposed data center boom that's going on. And it's a big issue actually here in my community in Melbourne because I'm surrounded by an industrial area, which is kind of primed for this kind of development, and some of that's already going on. You dug into some construction figures in your Guardian column this week, though, and found that maybe the boom isn't quite as straightforward as we've been told.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing right at the moment, all the data that comes out in the run-up to the GDP figures, the June quarter GDP figures will be out next week. So spoiler alert, that's what we'll be talking about next week. And the first bunch of these figures that are put out is to do with construction. So they do all the amount of construction being done in the June quarter, so April, May, and June. And you've got residential building, non-residential building, and what we call engineering construction, which is basically infrastructure, roads, rail, ports, all of that type of thing. And the reality is, there is not a real big boom in that non-residential construction which all the data centers come under. So far, all we're really seeing with this data center boom is the importation of an absolute shit ton of GPU units. And,
that's the technical economist term, an absolute shit ton.
Shit ton. You can definitely graph that.
Yeah. Which axis is shit ton on, Greg?
Yeah, generally the y-axis, unless you're talking time. And we're seeing a huge increase in the importation of GPUs, of basically chips and sort of computational units that are all used to just go inside computers.
I want to buy myself a new laptop, and they're so freaking expensive.
They're expensive because memory and all the video cards that used to, GPUs, I can remember back in the day, we used to just, when I say we, certain nerds who were into gaming and computers used to worry about their GPU units for how good they could run, whatever, Call of Duty or something. And now they're just
Diablo 2
churning them out for data centers. And the reason why they're going so expensive is not just that data centers that take up all the supplies, that data centers run them flat chat. And as you know, with anything sort of electronic, it does not run forever. And if you're running it flat out day and night, they burn out, they need to be replaced. And that's where we're seeing a huge boom. But the problem for us in Australia is, we're importing all of those. We don't make the chips. And once you plug them in, there's not a lot of jobs around the data centers. There's a reason the data centers have no windows, no anything. They're not made for humans. They are made for, computer chips. And
a couple of electricians, some software, maybe some software people.
Someone monitoring it, but a lot of the monitoring even will be done, off-site, because that can be done by remote. And so it's probably not even in Australia, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So the boom that we're hoping, if you can say anything positive about these things, is going to be in constructing the data centers, because someone's got to build all these things. Now, the problem is we're not yet really seeing that flow through. We're seeing the big investment coming in the machinery and equipment, not in the construction. Now, there is some data suggesting there's construction coming. It's on the way. It's being planned. It's being approved. But thus far, all the boom for the economy is really just kind of, how would I say? It's a spreadsheet sort of boom in that it'll show up in the national accounts, because investment in machinery and equipment goes to national accounts. But is it generating jobs? Is it generating wages? Is it doing anything to improve us? Not yet.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about that, actually. So as you said, the GDP figures are out next week, and we'll find out a bit more then. But I want to know about how this is affecting ordinary people. You're saying that the riches aren't raining down on us as might have been expected.
Yeah. No. I mean, because you think back to the mining boom, which was definitely a boom, and it was a boom in construction.
Yeah. And you could see that in your community. For people who were alive then, I remember when I was graduating high school, from my like regional town, the options were, you know, go to uni in Brisbane, or maybe some people were thinking about joining the military, and a bunch of people were like a real consideration was to go do FIFO work for you know a few years, get some money behind them. And I mean, it doesn't seem like that there's sort of an equivalent with data centers, right?
No, and that was the thing. Looking at these figures, if you look at the overall sort of level of construction, it's nowhere near what we were seeing in 2004, 5, and 6. You know, nowhere near that level. And look, maybe it's coming, but the suggestion that this is flowing into a huge amount of jobs, and also one of the things about that mining boom is because we had all these construction workers, all these builders going off and working in Broome and wherever. That meant if you wanted to build a house or something in Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, wherever, there was a shortage of workers. And so construction wages for construction workers went up everywhere because there was a real shortage. And if you look at the data back in sort of 2004, 5, and 6, there was a huge spike in the wage growth of construction workers. It was hitting like 6% a year going up. At the moment, construction wages are basically exactly the same as overall wages. There's no spike. There's no indication that suddenly we're seeing this massive shortage of workers. And the problem is, though, we've got the Reserve Bank saying, oh, there's all this investment coming in, big flow of investment. That's creating, too much activity in the economy. And I'm like, yeah, but all that activity is just people buying a shirt ton of computer chips, getting them installed, and it's not flowing through to the rest of us. And yet you're using it as an excuse to raise interest rates to slow the economy. I'm like, cripes, at least wait to see if there is actually a boom before you start penalizing us for the boom.
And I mean, if this boom was to, assuming it does come, was to benefit Australian society more, you'd be hoping, I would have thought, for more than just construction jobs as well. Australia has a highly educated workforce. You'd be hoping that there'd be opportunities in, computing, software, ethics, all these other fields. And that, is maybe true to some extent, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of evidence of those diverse opportunities coming through as well.
Yeah, we're not seeing this drive for, the government sort of, Andrew Charlton, who's the Minister for AI, which is just bizarre that there is a Minister for AI, I guess.
Brave new world, Greg. Brave new world.
Is sort of talking about, we got to be part of the supply chain and things like that. But, companies, these foreign companies, they're just using Australia basically as a piece of land that, is close to city centres, that has good infrastructure in terms of energy supply and things like that. So
relatively reliable regulatory regimes, all that kind of basic stuff.
Yeah, and we've got a government that seems to be bending over to welcome us because they believe that this is going to power something. And I'm very skeptical of so-called productivity benefits that have come from AI. Look, I think there will be benefits from things like medical research because, data centers are really good at doing, or AI is really good at doing big computations of differential equations where there's lots of moving parts. But, okay, that's great. But is this really going to lead to a productivity boom? Is this going to lead to a jobs boom? I don't see it. And especially when you see the amount of supposed investment in these data centers, and then you line it up with the reality that a lot of these AI companies are not making profits. And also the demand for energy that these things bring is almost not possible, given how much extra supply of energy is needed to be put in the system.
Yeah.
And then when you weigh it up, that it's probably going to lead to overall greater emissions. I'm struggling to see a great deal of benefits, but it's a new shiny thing. And unfortunately, it seems, as we saw in the National Cabinet, the government, when push comes to shove, will bend to allow, coal and gas to be used to power these things.
Yeah.
We took a little excursion because we felt we had to do that to get rid of some evil. And I think you'll see it's going to be a short-term excursion.
On day 10 of Operation Epic Fury, we are winning with an overwhelming and unrelenting focus on our objectives.
He said it will continue as long as necessary, Major, but he also said it will be over very soon. He didn't exactly say how that would happen, didn't put a lot of meat on that bone, but nevertheless, he made that claim.
So, speaking of a lack of riches, I suppose, I couldn't help but notice that fuel is effing expensive again, and that the war on Iran is still effing going. National Cabinet released a statement saying Australia's fuel reserves remain, quote, healthy. That's encouraging. But is there more that governments can be doing here? Like, what if this goes on for months or years?
What, you don't think Donald Trump's going to be able to solve the Middle East in the next day or two?
Well, evidence would suggest...
Past performance is a pretty good indicator of future lack of success, I think, of this. Look, I'm not too worried about the fuel reserves. I think that's, that is what it is. But yeah, you're right. Fuel prices have gone up. I was driving past here in Canberra and the unleaded's back around $2.10.
Yeah, I've left my fuel light on for like a week now. And I'm tricking myself into thinking it's going to get better, but I don't think it is.
And diesel's like back to $2.50.
Yeah.
Which is horrendous. The problem is, you're right, is that fuel's back up because oil prices are going back up because everyone's, it's been so weird over the past 6 months. Oil prices go up. Donald Trump says, "Oh, mission accomplished. I've got a deal done," and then they'll go down, and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, that's bullshit." They go back up, and then he says, "Oh, look, we're only weeks, days away, and I've got everyone on board," and everyone buys it, and nothing happens. And it's almost like we've reached a point where everyone knows, this ain't going to happen. And also, especially where you've now got Donald Trump declaring total economic war on Iran, which is kind of a weird thing, given the US doesn't import anything really from Iran.
No.
And of course, this also coincides with the government getting rid of the cuts to the fuel excise. So now we're really seeing petrol prices react truly to oil prices in a way that they perhaps weren't so much when we had the excise cuts. But hey, not everyone's losing out of this, Angus.
No. We talked a little bit about corporate profits on the show last week, but we've had some more announcements. Our friends at Ampol and Woodside have announced their latest results. What do we find out, Greg?
Yeah, Woodside done very nicely. Their profits went up 27% over last year. So the first half of this year's profits were 27% higher than the first half of last year. Just as a little side note, inflation, 3.5% growth, so 27%, just a little tad higher than that.
I'm no economist, but 27 seems like a bigger number than 3.
Yeah, they've done very well, but they're the poor cousins in this arrangement to Ampol. Now, Ampol doesn't export gas, but it very much, as people know from Ampol service stations, does very well out of petrol, and its profit growth this year over last year, we're not talking 27%, not 60%, not 100%. We're talking a 376% increase in profits over last year.
So these are yearly numbers, not
yearly
half-yearly.
growth, 376%.
Cool.
Yeah. Now, basically, what's happened there is, they fully passed on the increase in oil prices to their customers.
Sounds like it.
Because they had no choice, Angus. No. This is just, hey, what do you expect them to do?
It's just business.
Do you expect them to just make less money? No. They have to charge more. And so as a result, that's why we saw petrol prices skyrocketing, because organizations like Ampol were making an absolute mozza out of these things. And you might think, oh, well, at least petrol prices didn't go up 376%. It's like, no, but they certainly were surging until the government kicked in $3 billion to artificially keep petrol prices and diesel prices down.
This is the cut to the temporary cut to the fuel
through
excise.
the cut to the excise. Now, in a sense, what was happening there was the government, through spending of taxpayer funds, was spending money because Ampol's profits were going up 376%. Now, if Ampol were like, okay, well, our costs really haven't gone up. We don't need to pass on the full brunt there. We can just cover our costs increases. It's not like the labor or anything has gone up, and we won't have a 376 increase in price. Maybe we'll only have a 27% increase like Woodside. Well, that would have flowed through, and we wouldn't have seen the big jump in prices at the Bowser and other places. And but no, they act like, oh, we've got no choice. We have to pass on. We have to take advantage of this. And it really highlights that what we've been saying for a very long time now, that company profits directly affect inflation. It's not a case of labor and wages driving inflation, because as I say, private sector wages in the past year, they didn't go up 376%. They went up 3.1%. Less than inflation, which at the time to June had gone up 4%, and even now 3.5%, still below that. So wages are not driving inflation. In fact, they're actually they're keeping inflation down. But what is inflation? It's a measurement of increase in prices. Well, who charges the prices? Who sets the prices? Companies. Companies like Ampol, companies like Woodside with gas, companies like Coles, who made a 13% increase in their profits, companies like Woolworths, who had an 18% increase in their net profits after tax. They're the ones. You don't go into Coles and Woolies and go, hey, can we haggle over the price of Coke? No, they set the prices. And when they are making profits massively above inflation, that has an impact. And we saw already at the end of last year and the start of this year, even before the Iran war, Dave Richardson and Matt Saunders and I put out a paper showing that profits were the main driver of inflation. And I'm pretty sure when we get the national accounts GDP figures next week, we're going to see that still happening.
So, Greg, we're talking here about how corporations are, making the most of the situation and making stonks of money, as a favorite word of the show. But is there anything that the Australian government could do to make sure that instead of those benefits only flowing through to their shareholders, actually flowing through to, Australian society, Australian people?
I mean, remember, Australia's the second biggest exporter of LNG in the world, second biggest. Other nations that export gas, like Qatar, when the price of gas and oil goes up, they celebrate because they know they are going to also be getting stonks of revenue from the sale and export of that gas. In Australia, no, we know we're just going to get basically our ass handed to us at the petrol bowser and when we pay for our next gas bill. And we'll look at things like the Petroleum Resources Rent Tax, which is notionally meant to tax super profits in gas. We're not going to see anything. In fact, the budget is not predicting any sort of increase in that. And that the budget came after the Iran war, so they know what's happening. So what we could do is just tax the bloody gas, tax the gas exports, put a 25% export tax on gas. That would raise $17 billion a year. That's a lot of money. It could do a lot of good. And instead of us looking at these company profits and thinking, Christ, we're all being just taken for a ride. Instead, we'd be thinking, well, at least we're going to be able to do some good out of this. Because right now, companies are laughing at us, and the government is instead of acting, is saying, "Oh well, we got to protect their interests," and it's a tough time right now. We don't want to upset the oil and gas sector. They're dealing with a lot of ructions. No, they're dealing with a shit ton of profits. That's what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And, and we're all worse off for it.
Yeah. Maybe $17 billion a year, maybe it could build some of that renewable energy infrastructure that apparently Queensland and the Northern Territory don't have.
Sure as heck could.
Yeah. Finally, we're running out of time pretty quickly, but I did just want to pick up one story that came out sort of ahead of National Cabinet. There's been some East Coast, West Coast beef, but much, much, much lamer. Western Australian Premier Roger Cook said some mean things about the Productivity Commission. What's going on, Greg? And importantly, what does it have to do with the GST?
Yeah, what we're talking about here is let's be blunt, a deal done by the Morrison government to try and buy votes in Western Australia. Because the GST, the way the GST used to be split up it wasn't just your 20% of the population, you get 20% of the GST. Because the GST is designed to try and ensure that wherever you live in Australia, you have access to the same level of education, healthcare, and whatever. And so what the GST Commission does is they look at, okay, Western Australia, you don't actually need as much GST because you can raise a heck of a lot of revenue from iron ore royalties. Queensland, you don't need as much GST as, say, Tasmania, because you can raise a heck of a lot of royalties from coal and gas. And your ability to raise revenue is much greater than other states. So we'll give you a smaller share of the GST pie because you're not as reliant on, you don't need as much GST. There aren't many iron ore mines in Tasmania or ACT, so we'll help you out.
A famously effective argument in Western Australia.
Yeah. And the problem with that is it worked really well for Western Australia before the mining boom. Before the mining boom, Western Australia used to get a bigger share of GST and sort of federal revenue going to the states than it would have if you just did it on a per capita basis.
Yeah.
Then the iron ore boom happened and suddenly, Western Australia doesn't need as much, and suddenly they thought it was all very unfair, especially at the height of the mining boom when they were going to get bugger all GST at all because iron ore prices were so high. That meant royalties were so high. Western Australia thought this was terribly unfair, despite having, for most of Federation, being a beneficiary of this kind of system. So they complained a lot. Scott Morrison came in and said, hey, we'll set the floor so that you get at least 70% of the per capita sort of equivalent of GST, then got raised to 75%. This made Western Australians very happy. And it was forecast that this was going to cost around, because this happened in 2018-19, that this was going to cost around $5 billion because all the other states saw this and went, hang on, if you're giving a bigger share to WA than they should be getting, well, the GST pie is a finite pie. That means we all get less because you're giving more to WA. And the government said, don't worry, we'll put in a no worse off thing, so we'll top up what you're missing out on because we're giving so much more to WA.
It's amazing that they can find $5 billion when they want to.
Yeah, well, it was said it was going to cost $5 billion from then out to 24, 25. The Productivity Commission just did a report into it and found, that $5 billion just a smidge wrong. It's actually $23 billion that this has cost us.
Bummer.
And they have suggested that let's undo this. This was a dumb decision. Now, the problem is the Productivity Commission back in 2018 were the ones who did a report into the GST. And while they didn't specifically recommend doing what Morrison did, they did say, it is a bit unfair for WA. And basically the government used that as its cover.
Yeah.
And at the time, the Productivity Commission didn't arc up and go, wait, we didn't mean do this.
Yeah, sure.
But what's happened this week is because the Productivity Commission said, hey, let's unwind this, WA has got very snooty. Roger Cook, the Premier of WA, has come out and...
He called them East Coast Clowns, which
East Coast
for anyone
clowns.
looking for a Canberra Halloween party costume, there you are. You're welcome.
You'll never lose votes bashing anyone in the East Coast if you're a WA politician, and Roger Cook is an expert at doing this. So, yeah, East Coast Clowns, Madeleine King, WA Resource Minister, she sort of bought into it a bit, saying, yes, they're economic rationalists, and that's what Albanese has also been saying. Productivity Commission's come out and said, oh, don't be mean. And look, as a general rule, I'm not on the Productivity Commission side. I kind of think they're a fairly useless neoliberal organisation. But as Richard Dennis has pointed out, you shouldn't be bashing them, but also Productivity Commission, why are you arcing up now? Where were you in 2018 when your advice was being misused? Maybe you should have spoken up then when it was a bit tougher to do so. But yeah, as I say, this is a lot of money, $23 billion over the period. That could have done some good.
Yeah.
And instead it has been done to basically, because what we're saying here is essentially we're giving, over that period, WA got $23 billion more than it would have if we just kept under the old rules. And that's, is that really a good use of federal funds? It didn't even win Morrison any votes in WA. It lasted maybe for what election? Then 2022 he got slapped. So, but now you're in a situation where it has become a key political thing of you put this thing in place to buy votes, but now you can't take it away, because if you suggest you're going to take it away, that just leaves a massive opportunity for the opposition to say, oh, we'll keep it. And then that becomes the issue in WA.
Yeah, and becomes really politically tricky to reverse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Greg, that's probably all we've got time for. Thanks so much for hanging out on this Thursday morning.
No worries, Angus. Thanks for filling in for Eleanor. And once again, get well. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We will be back with another Dollars and Cents next week. And as I say, it'll be all GDP. So we're talking about the entire economy, apart from the unpaid work, which, of course, makes up so much of the economy. But apparently that doesn't count.
No.
We'll be talking about that next week. But this episode of Dollars and Cents was recorded on the 27th of August, and some things may have changed. If you want to find out all about the construction figures and what's actually going on with the AI boom, check out my column on Guardian Australia. And if you want to find out everything else that you need to know about, head on over to thepoint.com.au. Stonks of information, some great columns, some great guest op-eds from community advocates, some politicians as well, just heaps there. Head on over and check it out. As always, our music is from Blue Dot Sessions. Everyone, have a great week, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.